living things feeding. I don't know as for how many persons this concept would have been new to, but in terms of human being feeding, I'm quite sure that we all should understand that human being, the only way we can stay alive is for us to get some form of food so that we can get the nutrients. And in terms of getting the food, we don't manufacture our own food. But let's say, for example, plants. Now, plants actually can make their own food by a process that is known as photosynthesis. Now, before we move into food chain itself, then of course there are some introductory concepts that persons need to be aware of. For example, your environment. So persons should know that, or a person should be cognizant that the surrounding that they are living within, that is what is considered to be their environment. And simply because it is your surrounding, that simply means that your environment is constantly changing. Because if you're sitting on the veranda, for example, and you have no one in terms of human being around you, that is your present environment, nobody around you. All of a sudden, a relative or a friend should come and visit you. Then, of course, your environment would change. So, your environment is basically anything that is around you presently. In the classroom, if it was physical classroom, you are surrounded by living and non-living things. So the books, the decks, the teacher, and other students, etc. The list goes on. So from that list, now I can ask you to tell me the things that are living, and of course that would be the teacher and your classmate. And the things that would consider to be non-living would be the decks and the chairs, for example. The surrounding of any organism composed of biotic and abiotic factors. So these two terms, of course, it is a must that we know what these two terms mean. So biotic, the living things in the environment, and the abiotic, these are the non-living things within your environment. So in that classroom setting that I just give in terms of scenario, now the teachers and the students, those would be biotic or abiotic. I'm asking a question based on the definition. The teachers and the student, would they fall under biotic or abiotic? Anyone?
Biotic, sir.
Okay, right. So the student and teacher would fall under biotic because we are saying that this is the or
Yeah,
these are
living.
right, yeah, these are the living things within our environment. And the abiotic now would be, for example, the desk and the chair in that example. So on the screen, of course, they are giving you other examples in terms of the abiotic. So they said that light, temperature, wind, um, the wind pattern, rocks, and of course soil. As for the biotic, basically all of those animals that you're seeing in the picture, those would be examples in terms of biotic. Habitat, next term that we need to be cognizant of in terms of its function. So the habitat now is basically the place that suit an organism and where it can live. So, for example, in terms of habitat, we have basically two types of habitat that we're going to focus on. We have one that is called terrestrial habitat, and we have aquatic habitat. So, there's a difference. So,
What is journalistic, sir?
repeat, Jones.
What is journalistic? Sir, I'm asking what is journalistic.
Or what terrestrial habitats? Right.
Yes,
That's
sir.
yeah. That's what I'm getting into. So I'm going to explain it. Don't worry. Right. So I'm saying that we are looking at habitat by itself. So that's the main thing we're looking at. So if I should now ask you to give me or ask you the question, are there different types of habitat? Then you should say yes. So the two types of habitats that we're going to look at are terrestrial habitats and aquatic habitats. So Jones would have just asked a question. what are the differences between these two, or what each habitats mean? Now, all those organisms that survive on land, those organisms, their habitat is land. And all those who actually survive in water, their habitat is aquatic. So terrestrial habitats are basically land. So like human being, for example, our habitat is terrestrial. So your habitat must, looking at pointer two, your habitat must supply everything the organism needs for growth and reproduction. So everything that you need in terms of being a human being, you can find all of those on land. Even though you eat fish that comes from the sea, you still can survive without the fish. So your habitat should be an environment, your habitat should be a place where you can find everything to survive. Once you cannot find everything to survive, then you cannot say that that place is your habitat. So habitat may be on land, that is the third pointer, and the habitat that is considered to be the land, then you would say that that is terrestrial habitats. And looking at the image where you see the cow feeding, so the habitat for a cow would be on land, not in water, because you would realize that grass don't grow in water. Yes, you have
Elastic is the animal that on land, sir.
which one? Right, terrestrial is land habitat. When we say terrestrial, we're talking about land habitat, that is terrestrial, while while water would actually be aquatic. So that's the difference between the two. Terrestrial is land habitat, while the aquatic is actually um, water. So like fish, sharks, all those dolphins, the habitat for those living organism would be water. Living organisms need
Sir,
particle.
can I go back to the first picture for me, sir, please, sir? Yes, sir. 1 minute, sir.
Jones, if his notes writing, I'm not gonna wait on you.
Sir,
Remember,
just go on now, sir.
okay. Remember, I told the student don't. I can't allow you to use the class time to write notes. It's just one session. The notes is being shared um within the different groups. So you take the explanation during class. The important thing is that you understand. Once you understand, then there is time allotted for you to write the notes. The notes will be posted. Right, so living organisms need particular things in order to survive. They only they only in habitats where they can find these things. So any animal that you're looking at, any living thing, you're not gonna find some form of animal there in the desert. If the animal realizes that it is within the desert, then it gonna actually try to move to an area where it can find something to eat and drink. So that's what the pointer is saying. So tropical fish need warm, salty water, so they are found in habitats such as Caribbean Sea. So like the fish now, for example, the fish that we call sea fish, they're saying that because they need water that is warm and the water that is salty, then obviously you will find that they
Sir,
yes, Mackenzie.
the only camel in the desert.
All right. In terms of we watching television and seeing them in like you're talking about the camel whenever they are transporting persons. That's what you're talking about, or in terms of them.
Yes, sir.
Alright, in terms of them.
Living there.
Alright, in terms of them living there, we might actually see pictures and videos on television or on the internet. But you have to remember that what we are seeing, those were actually recorded, those were taken in terms of images, in terms of real life situation. I'm sure that if you should go in the desert, you're gonna find somewhere where they drink water and somewhere where they get something to eat. Because it is not like they can survive without those. It is just that once when you watch when persons broadcast things, whether photography or whether video, remember that it's not a situation where they
Sir,
would
and something they use camera trick also to make it real, sir.
right. So it's not like they capture the 24 hours in terms of their all day living. They just capture something to actually present. But in real life situation, then they have to get something to eat and something to drink in terms of water. All right, so some of the biotic and abiotic components that organisms need in their habitats are one, sources of food. So we have water, we have air, we have light, we have suitable temperature. So what they are saying is that in your environment, you're gonna need both biotic and abiotic to actually survive. Because let's say, for example, in terms of the light, that would be abiotic, but you still need it to survive. Understand the temperature? There should be a suitable temperature. So that suitable temperature should be between boiling point and freezing point. 'Cause we know that water boil at 100 degrees Celsius, and of course, water freeze at 0 or below degrees Celsius. So you have to find environment where the temperature is suitable, where they said that the normal human being body temperature is anywhere between 37 to 38 degrees Celsius. Some textbook will tell that it is 37, another textbook will tell that it is 38. So it is within that range that should be your normal body temperature. So any environment that you're within, the temperature should be as close as possible to that 37 degrees Celsius. Because if the temperature is 0, for example, then that is freezing point, and your body not gonna actually start to freeze. If you're in an environment where it is 60, 70, 80, 100 degrees Celsius, then your skin gonna literally melt, because your body cannot withstand such high temperature. So the temperature must be suitable for your living. Ecosystem, ano- another very important concept for us to um, understand or to be cognizant of before looking at food chain itself. So ecosystem, this is a community of living organisms and physical environment. Now, within an ecosystem, all the organisms that are within that ecosystem, they basically normally survive on each other. That means they eat each other, or they eat a particular organism within that group of organisms to actually survive. So in terms of the image, we have flies, we have water weeds, we have,
Sure.
yes, Mackenzie.
So we can ask her something
Ye-
about the water.
yes, miss.
When time the frog green up the water, the fish them in the oil fish surviving under the water them with the frog.
So we say when the frog do like defecate and urinate.
Yeah, and the water green and ugly and oil fish survive.
All right, with those organisms, their body, I mean, there is something that is called adaptation, and those organisms, their body can filter, their body can survive within those environment, not like human being, because all those organisms, they are built different in terms of what their body can take in versus human being. If a human being now, for example, should drink some of that water, I'm sure that we're gonna have diarrhea. If we should go in the water, we're gonna have some form of skin disease or fungus, etc. It is simply because their body actually immune to that environment. So we are uh, we are all living organisms, and all living organisms basically make up different in terms of what their body can handle. So as for the fish, it is just that they can digest the water, in terms of they can digest all the different things that would be in that water for them to consume, for example. So they can survive. It is just that their body made that way to actually be able to survive within that environment in comparison to human being, for example. So in an ecosystem, the living organisms, which would be the biotic elements, interact. That means they actually mix and mingle with each other and with the abiotic elements around them. So Within the pan, for example, the water would be a abiotic. The stone or sand would be a abiotic. If there's a piece of stick in the water, that would be abiotic. So what they are saying is that within that environment, within that ecosystem, then those organisms gonna actually interact. Anything they are doing, just about whatever within the environment, they actually survive around it. In an ecosystem, each organism has its own role to play. So looking at the image there, the water weeds, for example, its function is to produce food by itself naturally. That's its function. So if there's no water weed, then basically the organism that would not feed on that water weed or depend on it will basically have nothing to actually feed on. Because the snail, for example, the snail actually feed on the water weed. I mean, in some instances. So that is where they are saying that all the organisms they basically have their own role to play within that ecosystem. So in terms of the terms again that we need to be cognizant of, so environment, and of course your environment is basically anything in your surrounding, anything around you. That is what is considered to be your environment. And because of that, your environment is always changing. Your environment is constantly changing. So if you're on the veranda now, everything on the veranda would consider to be within your environment. If all of a sudden you should be asked to go to the town to go and purchase something, and you have to take a motor vehicle with a car or bus, taxi, then you in that car, the persons within that surrounding would be your environment. You understand? So your environment constantly change, and that is simple because your environment is what is around you. After looking at environment, biotic and abiotic, which of course these two terms will be in your environment. So everything around you, they have to fall under one of these. So either they are living or they are non-living. You can't in between. Understand? So either they are biotic or abiotic. And of course we have more than enough examples. So the biotic would basically be
Yes,
all
sir.
those animals around you or plants. While the abiotic, anything that cannot eat, anything that cannot make its own food in terms of provide nutrient, anything that cannot allow.
Sir,
Yes, Mackenzie. I
when
mean,
that set we fisherman they are seeing
mm-hmm.
and they throw dirt something in the water, right? And it fish get itchy and just as the fish get itchy they catch the fish
Thank
and
you,
they
Jimmy.
sell that the fish there. What happened to them and they have the dirty something in there where they eat already? Yes, so one to it and we eat it. What happened to
Let
them?
them clean them.
All right. In terms of the fish now, let's say for example they consume something that you consider to be dirty. Now, once the human being gonna prepare the fish, normally we would clean the fish. Say if it is just something that is dirty, then once the fish is clean, then it not going to cause any harm. Now, if the substance is a poisonous substance, then that can be detrimental to the human being, meaning that the fish would now consume something that is poisonous, and then we know how to consume it. And that is the reason why, let's say, for example, there's a fish kill where the pollution that we would have been looking at for the last few classes where I did
Where the
mention,
oil joint there.
right, with the oil
Where they are
are back down that side, back Flatbridge side where the
Yes,
back
where the
side.
water was clean up there.
Right, so back down Flatbridge side where the backside did send off the acid in the water. If you should consume those fish, you're definitely going to sick because those fish now would have consumed poisonous or toxic substances. So to answer your question, Mackenzie, if the substance is poisonous or toxic, then it will cause harm to the human body. But if it is just something in terms of sanitization, once the fish is clean, by the persons who are preparing the fish, then there will be no harm. But once it is toxic, then definitely. Right. So to answer your question, all right. So habitat. So again, this is another term that we need to be aware of. And I said that we have two types of habitat. We have terrestrial, or if you want to say land habitat, and we have aquatic, and that is the water habitat. So we have some living things that can only survive in water, and some only can survive on land, and we have some that can, of course, switch between both. So like human being now, we can survive on water once we have everything on the water, in terms of we being on the boat, we being on the ship, then perfect. But in terms of staying in the water, no, we can't survive in the water, because the longer you're in the water, the colder the water gonna get, and of course it will reach that point where the body not gonna start to freeze. All right. So the next term would have been ecosystem. And as for the ecosystem, now the ecosystem is normally, we said that it is a community of living organisms, and all these organisms within this community, they normally survive on each other, and within the ecosystem of that particular environment, each organism basically has its own function or its own role in terms of what they're going to actually um, contribute. All right. So
Yes, sir.
and of course food chain. So that is the main concept that we need to understand. So in terms of food chain, its definition, this is normally described, or this is the sequence by which energy passes from plant to animal and then to other animals. So a food chain. So looking at the screen, you will realize that we have some organisms and we have forward arrow. Now the arrows basically showing the direction to which the energy is traveling. Now as you realize, grass is actually at the start of the food chain. Now students, most food chain normally start with what is called a producer, and plants basically they are a producer, meaning that they make their own food. So the grass now will actually make its own food by that process that is called photosynthesis. So once the grass make its food, then the grasshopper now will actually feed on the grass. So looking above grass, you will actually see producer. So producer mean that the grass make its own food. Then you have the grasshopper. So all the organism that actually go towards the right, leaving from the grass, we call them consumers. So the grasshopper is called the primary consumer, and the snake is called the secondary consumer. Can somebody tell me why they think you would call the grasshopper the primary and the snake the secondary, and not the snake primary? Can somebody tell me why? Why I think the grasshopper is called a primary consumer?
Sir, because I don't think snake eat grass, sir.
Well, well, yes, snake don't eat in terms of feeding on the grass, right? They don't necessarily eat it, but that's not the answer. That's not why the snake is not called.
Because the snake is bigger than the grasshopper, and the grass up the snake. No, no.
All right, now the reason why the primary consumer is the grasshopper is simply because it is the organism, or it is the animal that eat the grass directly. Understand? So any organism that is closest to the producer, that actually feed on the producer directly, that is what you would call the primary consumer. So the snake is the secondary consumer because the snake eat the primary consumer, and the hawk is the tertiary consumer because it eat the secondary consumer. And at the end of the food chain, we have something that is called decomposer. Now, what decomposers does is that once the if the plant should die, if the grasshopper should die, if the snake should die, or if the alg should die, then fungi or fungus can actually feed on all of the dead remains of these four organisms. So that is why they are called decomposers. So anything that dead, whether plant or human being or any other animal or any other living thing, once their body actually touches the soil, then we have what are known as decomposers that start to break down their body. So we normally say that your body rotten or the plant rotten out after a while. It is simply because these decomposers actually feed on them. So they are known as decomposers. So the feeding
Sir,
relationship,
so why the fungus eat the grasshopper, the snake, and the ark when they are die, when they dead?
that is simply because um, things that are called decomposers they actually feed on dead things. So decomposers normally feed on dead things. So anything that is alive, they don't feed on them. They feed on dead things. So they are called
Okay, sir.
right. So the
Sir,
definition,
so the decomposer come like junker, sir.
no. You wouldn't call Janko decomposers because Janko also eat um things that are alive, meaning that they will actually kill it by themselves. It is just that the Janko, it is a animal that actually gravitate towards things that are actually dead in terms of animals, because the Janko, they're not gonna eat, like they're not gonna feed a lot on plants, for example. They mostly gravitate towards meat. It is just that let's say for example the scent, they can detect the scent from that distant, and they actually gravitate towards it. All right, so students, in terms of the notes,
Okay, sir.
yes, sure. So the notes, I
And
put it.
that's it.
I'm saying that the notes, you can check for the notes on the platforms of them. Say what we would have discussed from the start of the class till now. Ensure that you have those notes um, for the next class. Mean that you write up to this slide. So you write up to this slide, right,
Yes,
right.
sir. Just send them in WhatsApp, sir.
Yeah, yes. I send the PowerPoint in WhatsApp already in terms of the PowerPoint, but I'm gonna convert it for those persons who are having problem opening the PowerPoint. Cause I know that some persons who don't have any application that can open PowerPoint, they're gonna have a problem. So I'm gonna convert it. All right, I'm gonna convert it. All right. So see you next class, students. So have a productive day. So I'm gonna do all those conversion and send it in WhatsApp.
Same to you, sir.
Yes.
Thank you, sir. Same to
Yeah.
you.
And please remember to indicate that you're present in the WhatsApp group.
Yes,
Oh,
sir. My
yes,
kids are
sir.
present.
Yeah.
Remember?
Yeah. Thanks much. Yes.